Atlanta has always been a city that thrives on whispers, but on this night, the air felt heavier than usual, like the streets themselves were holding their breath. This wasn't about music or flashy appearances, not about who wore what to an event, or who was booked for the hottest stage. No, this was different. This was about family, betrayal, and wounds that had been ignored for far too long. And at the center of it all stood Bambi, a woman who had spent years silencing herself for the sake of appearances, for the sake of keeping a family image intact, for the sake of her children. But there comes a point when silence turns into suffocation, and that night, Bambi decided she had nothing left to hold back. She walked into the room with every ounce of her history trailing behind her like chains she had carried too long, moments where she had been painted as dramatic, bitter, cold, moments where she was cast as the villain while Scrappy played innocent in the background. But this time, she wasn't going to swallow her pain. This time, she was going to let it spill until the whole room drowned in it. The sit-down with Momma Dee wasn't meant to be just a conversation. To Bambi, it felt like standing at the center of a storm that had been gathering for over a decade. Missed birthdays, whispered insults, sly posts on social media. Family gatherings she was excluded from, every single one of those wounds was stacked like kindling. And all it took was one spark to set them ablaze. The second she looked Momma Dee in the eyes, her voice came steady but sharp, a flame that had been waiting too long to rise. She reminded her that not even a week before, she had thrown a birthday party for her daughter Zio. Scrappy had promised he would be there. He told his daughter he'd show up, told the kids he would be present, told Bambi he wouldn't let them down this time. And when the day came, he vanished. Just another broken promise in a long line of disappointments. What twisted the knife even deeper was that Momma Dee didn't just excuse it, she hosted her own events for the children without even mentioning them to Bambi. As if the mother of the kids didn't deserve to know. As if she was some outsider who had to watch her family live their lives on Instagram. For years, this had been the cycle. Scrappy whispered one story to his mother, a different one to his wife, then sat back as they clashed, pretending he was just caught in the middle. It wasn't miscommunication, it was manipulation. And the ones who paid the price weren't just the adults. It was the children who grew up seeing loyalty traded for lies, who watched the adults they loved tear each other down because of one man's cowardice. Bambi's voice shook the room when she said it, clear enough to cut through all the excuses. He told me he was coming. He talked about it all week. Then he stood my daughter up and left me looking like a fool. Those weren't just words about one birthday, they were about years of gaslighting. About every time she was pushed to the margins. Erased from milestones that should have been hers to share. It was about being made to feel like a stranger in her own family. For once, Momma Dee didn't have her usual clapback waiting on her tongue. The queen who had built her reputation on sharp words and bigger-than-life personality shifted uncomfortably in her chair. And when she spoke, it wasn't with the authority of royalty but with the uncertainty of a mother caught off guard. She admitted that maybe Scrappy had been stirring the pot all along. Maybe he wanted the two women at odds so he could escape accountability. But to Bambi, those words sounded like yet another excuse, another way to avoid calling him what he was, the architect of their pain. How many times had she been promised that things would change? How many times had she watched photographs of her children surface from events she never knew about? The pattern was clear, and Bambi was no longer willing to pretend it wasn't. This wasn't just about family events. It was about dignity. It was about respect. It was about the toxic game Scrappy had perfected over the years, where he positioned himself as the victim in front of cameras, while pulling the strings behind the scenes. And while Momma Dee now claimed she wanted peace, Bambi wasn't quick to believe her. Not after 10 years of humiliation. Not after hundreds of chances wasted. Her voice cut across the room with cold precision. I don't know if this is real or if it's just for show. Because every time I start to trust, y'all prove me wrong. Her words landed like a hammer on glass, and the silence that followed was so thick even the cameras seemed to pause. For the first time in a long time, Momma Dee's royal mask cracked. She spoke softer, admitting that age had humbled her, that God had been speaking to her spirit, that she was tired of the chaos. But Bambi wasn't a young, hopeful wife anymore. She was a mother hardened by betrayal, a survivor of divorce, a woman who had learned to fight for her sanity and her children's peace. And she made it clear, her patience had expired. You fooled me once. Fooled me twice. Fooled me 470 times. That's not on you anymore. That's on me if I keep letting it happen. That night wasn't a sit-down, it was a reckoning. For the first time, Bambi shifted the blame where it truly belonged. She looked at Momma Dee and demanded that the erasure stop. No more missing out on family moments. No more finding out through Instagram. No more excuses about not thinking she'd want to be there. From this point forward, if there were events involving her children, she would be notified. Period. And yet beneath the fire in her voice, there was something deeper, something rawer, because this fight wasn't for her ego. It was for her kids. For the daughters and sons who didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of lies. For the children who shouldn't have to wonder why mommy and grandma couldn't sit in the same room. That vulnerability turned her anger into something even heavier, because everyone in that room knew this wasn't clout chasing. This was survival. When Bambi brought up the christening, the sacred event she had been completely excluded from, the room nearly collapsed under the weight of it. Her eyes burned as she demanded to know how something so meaningful could take place without her, the children's mother, being there. Momma Dee fumbled, claiming she assumed Bambi wouldn't attend because of tensions with Scrappy. But what Bambi heard was simpler than any excuse: "You erased me. You stole a moment from me that I can never reclaim." And in that moment, the truth could no longer be denied. This wasn't about oversights. This wasn't about misunderstandings. This was Scrappy deliberately planting seeds of division, lying to his wife and his mother, letting them tear each other apart while he walked free for the first time. Momma Dee admitted what Bambi had always known. Maybe he did pit us against each other. The words landed like thunder. Bambi leaned forward, eyes sharp, her suspicion finally validated in front of the cameras. This wasn't just her paranoia. This wasn't just her version of events. The Queen herself had confessed it. Scrappy had been playing them both, and as that confession hung heavy in the air, the storm outside seemed to creep into the room. This wasn't just reality TV anymore, it was the unraveling of years of manipulation. But the question that lingered like smoke was simple: could Bambi ever truly trust Momma Dee again? Could Momma Dee truly draw a line with her own son? Or was this truce just another fragile promise destined to crack the moment Scrappy walked back through the door? That confession from Momma Dee cracked open a wound that had been festering for years, but instead of healing it, the truth only made the pain sharper. Bambi sat back in her chair, her arms folded tight across her chest, eyes narrowing as if she was weighing every word. She wasn't about to celebrate a breakthrough when the scars on her heart reminded her how temporary words could be. She had heard promises before, had seen tears before, had listened to speeches about peace and family before, yet each time, she ended up blindsided. And now, hearing Momma Dee finally admit that her son had been the one pulling the strings, Bambi couldn't help but wonder if this was genuine regret or just another performance meant to smooth things over until the cameras shut off. The weight of betrayal doesn't disappear with one apology. It lingers, clings to the skin like smoke after a fire. Her voice was steady but cut through the air with razor precision. "Do you understand," she asked, each word slow and deliberate, "that you let this man, your son, convince you I was the enemy? Do you understand how many nights I went home humiliated because of something he whispered in your ear?" The questions weren't for show. They were accusations layered with years of heartbreak. For the first time, Momma Dee didn't fight back. She didn't raise her voice or toss out another nickname or try to drown the pain in theatrics. She sat there, her hands clasped in front of her, her crown slipping under the weight of honesty. With a trembling voice, she admitted what no one thought she'd ever say: "I let him. I let my baby play me. I let him play us both. And I'm ashamed." The room went still. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, catching the rare moment when the Queen of Clapbacks stripped herself bare. But if anyone thought Bambi would soften at that confession, they didn't know her journey. Forgiveness doesn't come easy to someone who's had their dignity shredded in front of the world. How could she forgive so quickly when she had been painted as bitter, cold, disrespectful, while all along she was simply surviving a marriage full of lies? She let the silence stretch before she responded, her voice trembling but fierce. She spoke about the birthdays Scrappy promised to attend but never showed. About the excuses he spun until she was the one blamed. About the family moments she had to piece together from Instagram posts, while being told she was the problem. Each word was heavy, dripping with years of pain that had been bottled up. Momma Dee pressed a hand to her chest, whispering apologies, insisting she didn't want to lose her grandbabies because she failed to see through her son's manipulation. That crack in her voice, that glimpse of fear, made it clear that this wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about a grandmother terrified of being cut off from the children she adored. For the first time, Bambi looked at her not as the queen, not as the enemy, but as a grandmother afraid of losing everything. "All I want," Momma Dee continued, tears forming in the corners of her eyes, "is to see them happy. I want to see them laugh, see them play, see them loved by all of us. That's it. I don't want any more wars." Her words were soft, but soft words don't erase sharp actions. Bambi shook her head, her voice low but unwavering. "You can say all that, but I've heard it before. I've seen you promise change, then turn around and do the same thing again. You want to prove you're serious? Then show me. Show me by making sure I never have to find out about another family event through social media. Show me by telling your son to stop lying to his kids. Show me by standing up to him when he tries to pit us against each other. Because words don't heal what's been done. Actions do." The weight of those demands lingered in the room like a storm cloud. And for once, Momma Dee didn't push back. She didn't argue or try to defend herself. She nodded, her voice firmer now, promising that she would change. I'll prove it. I won't let nobody, not even my son, come between us again. He might be my baby, but he's a grown man. And he gotta live with the choices he's made. That statement stunned even Bambi, because for years, Momma Dee had defended Scrappy no matter what he did. To hear her finally put responsibility back on him felt like a breakthrough. But breakthroughs don't erase history. Bambi leaned back, her arms still folded, her skepticism written across her face. We can try, she admitted. But I'm watching. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 470 times, shame on me. I won't let it happen again. The conversation shifted toward the children, and suddenly the air in the room grew heavier, not because of anger but because of love tangled in pain. Both women admitted they didn't want the children growing up under the shadow of dysfunction. Momma Dee swore she would never exclude Bambi again, swore she would notify her of every event, swore she would put the children above all else. Bambi, still guarded, agreed to baby steps. But those two words carried an ocean of meaning. Baby steps meant she was willing to try, but she wasn't willing to forget. It meant the door was cracked open, but the trust wasn't rebuilt. It meant she would be cautious every single step of the way, and then came the question that changed the entire tone of the room. Bambi leaned forward, her eyes steady, her voice low but laced with steel. What happens when he finds out we sat here and talked about him? What happens when Scrappy realizes he can't play us anymore? The silence that followed was deafening. Momma Dee inhaled deeply, her tears drying into resolve, and for the first time her voice carried steel instead of softness. Then he'll have to deal with it. Because I'm not letting him come between us again. Not now, not ever. If he don't like it, that's on him. That declaration was bold, but dangerous. Because if there's one thing everyone knows about Scrappy, it's that he doesn't take betrayal lightly, especially not from the two women he has spent years controlling. And now, with both of them finally opening their eyes, his grip was slipping. The cameras caught the half-smiles, the shaky truce, the whispered promises, but what they couldn't capture was the storm brewing just outside the door. Because Bambi and Momma Dee might have started piecing together a fragile piece. But the real battle was waiting for the moment Scrappy walked back into the room. The uneasy silence in that room lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace but instead signals that something bigger is coming. Bambi walked away from the table with her arms crossed, her guard still up, her mind racing through everything that had just been said. She had spoken her truth, forced Momma Dee to admit things she never thought she would hear, and still, the victory felt incomplete. Because the one person who needed to be held accountable, the one who had spun these lies and fueled this war, wasn't sitting there with them. Scrappy was still in the shadows, watching, waiting, ready to twist the narrative the second he got the chance. And Bambi knew it. She had seen it too many times before. The moment she started to feel like progress was possible, he would swoop in with charm, with excuses, with just enough half-truths to make everyone second-guess themselves. That was his pattern. That was his survival tactic, but this time felt different. This time, Bambi wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting her children. Her voice from earlier still echoed in the back of her mind, words don't heal, actions do. And she meant it. She wasn't about to let another year go by where birthdays, christenings, or milestones were stolen from her. She wasn't going to let her children grow up thinking division was normal. She wasn't going to let Scrappy keep playing the victim while she carried the weight of being called bitter and cold. She was done swallowing the humiliation, done watching him paint her as the villain while hiding the truth from everyone else. If he thought he could keep control, he was in for a rude awakening. Momma Dee sat quietly, her own thoughts heavy with fear and regret. She had promised to stand up this time, promised not to let her son pit them against each other, promised to finally put boundaries in place. But promises are easy when the person you're protecting isn't in the room. What would happen when Scrappy found out about this sit-down? What would happen when he realized the women he had manipulated for years had finally compared stories, finally uncovered the truth? Would she be strong enough to face him down? Would she choose her grandbabies over her baby boy? It was a question she hadn't been forced to answer yet, but she would be, and soon, the city outside was buzzing with speculation. Social media was already ablaze with clips and whispers from the sit-down. Fans dissected every tear, every pause, every side-eye. Some swore this was the start of a new chapter, that maybe the women had finally put the children first. Others insisted it was only a matter of time before Scrappy blew it all up again. Hashtags trended, memes circulated, and the streets of Atlanta buzzed like a hive ready to sting. Everyone knew something bigger was coming, they just didn't know how big, and then the door opened. Scrappy walked back into the room, his presence immediately shifting the air. He wasn't loud, not at first. He didn't need to be. His silence carried its own weight, his eyes darting between his mother and his ex-wife as if he could smell the betrayal in the air. He had that look, the same one he wore every time he was cornered. The mix of confusion, indignation, and performance, all rolled into one. He didn't have to ask what had been said. He could feel it. The alliance forming between them was written all over their faces, and for the first time, he wasn't in control of the script. Bambi didn't flinch. She leaned back in her chair, arms still folded, and let her silence speak louder than words. Momma Dee shifted nervously, her earlier promises already being tested. Scrappy finally broke the silence, his voice low but laced with venom. So this what we doing now? Sitting around talking about me like I ain't even here? Plotting behind my back? The accusation hung in the air, but this time, neither woman rushed to defend him. Neither one jumped to soften his ego or redirect the blame. For once, he stood alone, his manipulation laid bare in front of both of them. Bambi's response was steady, her tone calm but cold enough to chill the room. We not plotting. We telling the truth. The same truth you've been hiding from both of us for years. And now? You don't get to spin it anymore. Her words cut deeper than shouting ever could, because they weren't emotional, they were final. Momma Dee nodded quietly beside her, her earlier tears replaced with resolve. You've been playing us, boy. Playing your wife, playing your mama, playing your kids. But it stops here. I'm done letting you drag me into your lies. Scrappy's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing between them. Realizing for the first time that the walls he had built were closing in on him, the cameras caught everything, the flicker of rage in his eyes, the tension so thick you could slice it. This wasn't just another scene for television. This was the unraveling of a man's control, the exposure of years of manipulation, the moment the women he thought would never unite finally turned on him. But whether this fragile alliance between Bambi and Momma Dee could survive his retaliation, that was the question hanging over Atlanta. Because if history had shown anything, it was that Scrappy wasn't about to go down without a fight. The storm had only just begun, and the next explosion wasn't a matter of if, it was when.